Hi, everybody. Hello. Sorry I missed yesterday. It ended up being a pretty crazy day.
I'm gonna clean it, Mom.
I missed yesterday too. Oh, I didn't even know.
Yeah, I told everybody's moms who I could get in touch with that I actually got called out to do a to catch a honeybee swarm, another one. Right.
Wait, I heard you got attacked by a raccoon.
Yeah, and that happened too later in the day. Yeah, it was a wild. It ended up being a real a day in which I hung out with wildlife a lot, not entirely all by choice. Yeah, so I went and caught a honeybee swarm yesterday, and that's actually what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start talking about honeybees a little bit, even though I'm definitely not an expert, and some of you might actually be able to help me with the class. You might know some stuff that I don't know. But after I came home and from catching the honeybees, I went on a walk in the woods with my daughter, and we were exploring the woods. And when we came out of the woods, we were walking down a street that was really overgrown and doesn't have, it was actually kind of like an alleyway in between a bunch of houses, and I got attacked by a raccoon and bitten on my leg before I even knew that it was there, and it was crazy. So I went to the hospital and got some rabies shots because
That sounds painful.
it was pretty painful. And really weird, and I had no idea it was coming. It was definitely not expected. But I did what I had to do, and I went straight to the hospital, to the emergency room, and they gave me the shots I needed, and I'm groggy. I like feel weird because the shots are like pretty intense that they give you. But I'm good, and that's important. So all of you, especially those of you in South Jersey right now, I've heard some interesting stories from other people that they've had raccoons get pretty close to them recently. So if you see a raccoon, just get as far away from it as you can. They're not nice even when they are healthy. So they're not to go, just don't approach them. And if they start coming towards you, get away as quickly as you can. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go outside or anything. That's what I'm worried about, is that people are going to be like, oh no, now I'm afraid of my backyard. Don't do that. Just be extra careful while you're out there looking around and stuff. So today, I said, I am going to start talking a little bit about honeybees. It looks like maybe Liv and Eliana are having some video troubles, but they're still here. So there's 5 of us today, and maybe Baron will join. I know we've had some password issues over the past couple days. I need to have a password now, so just try to remember that the password is Ecokids when you have to log in, and if you have friends that want to be a part of this, you can tell them that too. So today, going to do intro to Western honeybees, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my adventures in honeybeeing over the past like 3 weeks or so. Does that all sound good? Jaden, I think that your screen is also frozen. Are you able to see me okay and hear me okay? Okay, good. Cool. Whoops. I hit the wrong thing. No. I want this one. So, before I jump into this, does anybody want to share honeybee information with the group? anything that you know or love or questions that you might have, something like that. Let's go with Jaden first. Trying to unmute you. Come on. Maybe try, can you try to unmute yourself? It's not letting me. There you go.
Okay, great. Well, I don't know too much about honeybees, but I do know they are smaller. Like, in comparison to bumblebees.
Yeah.
Because they're, like, fat and chubby. No offense, but they are. They're more smaller.
Yeah, so lots of honeybees are, or sorry, lots of bumblebees are much bigger by comparison. That's true. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and then I think Liv had her hand up, so go to her. I don't know much at all.
Okay. Yeah, Liv, unmute yourself.
Well, this isn't really about just honeybees. It's kind of about bees in general. Is that they always like do stuff for their queen, and the queen lays eggs, and it's their basically goal in life is to reproduce, so they get all the pollen, and then all the queen has to do is lay eggs.
Yeah, that is true. The queen's main purpose, as far as I can tell, is to lay eggs and to generally just make the entire colony of bees happy. Like to the queen, if the queen is alive and the queen is healthy, everybody else is also happy and healthy and like functions properly. Yeah, the queen is kind of like all powerful, but only kind of. It's really interesting. Yeah, Baron, do you have a question or a comment? We're just like given all of our information about honeybees that we know right now.
So this isn't even about honeybees, but I just found this out. We had a praying mantis egg in our backyard, and it just hatched.
Cool. Did you see all the little babies?
Yeah, they're like all over the terrarium.
Nice. Okay, cool. Wow. Yeah, that we had some praying, I had a bunch of little praying mantis egg sacs in my garden around the yard, and I saw a bunch of little tiny babies in my sage plant a few days ago. So they hatched here too. That's really cool. And Baron, you have bees, right? Cool. That's great. So Elijah, is there anything you want to say about honeybees, or you want me to just get right to it? Y'all good? Okay. So the Latin name for the majority of bees that I think, the honeybees that I think people see in this area is Apis mellifera. And actually, so my last name is Mello, and it comes from the same Latin root, which is honey. M-E-L-L is a Latin word for honey. Mello in Portuguese means honey collector, which to me also could be like beekeeper. So maybe I'm like descended from a long line of beekeepers, and that's what I'm hoping. So this is where that word comes from. Anytime you see mel, it's talking about honey. And Apis is the honeybee genus. Apidae is the family that they are within, and the Apidae family has about 5,300 species of different bees, not just honeybees. There's so many bees out there, so many species. There are a few other honeybee species that are native to various parts of Asia, Southern Asia, Eastern Asia. This Apis mellifera is native to Europe. Sometimes people call them Italian honeybees, sometimes European honeybees, or Western honeybees, and that's what's the most common in the United States. There's actually a bumblebee trying to get into my attic right now. right above my head. I hope it stays outside. So I just have a whole bunch of pictures today. Any questions that you have or comments or ideas are definitely welcome. So this is a photo of the swarm that I collected yesterday. A friend of mine who lives about 20 minutes away called me yesterday afternoon, pretty close to when this class was supposed to start, and said, hey, there's a guy who's taking down an old fence behind my shop, and there are 3 swarms of honeybees on them. Why don't you come get them? So I did as quickly as I could before the fence came down. This is actually considered a fairly small swarm. And what happens, the reason, well, there's a bunch of reasons why a colony of bees might swarm, but the main one that I know of is that it just gets to be too big. There are too many bees inside the home, inside their hive or the tree that they're living in. So some of them all gather up and all at once fly away with a queen. A lot of times it's an older queen, so maybe like the queen that was like last year's queen or a queen that's getting a little bit old can be essentially like kicked out of the hive also, and a new queen can be reared and born in the old hive. So that's what could be going on here. Like a group of bees follows their queen away to find a new home. So I got there and I suited up. I put on some protective gear, and I can talk a little bit about that. And then I had a cardboard box, very simple cardboard box that I just knocked all the bees into. I like put the cardboard box underneath where these, where the swarm starts, and they're basically one big cluster. They all like move together almost, one big in one big mass. So I put the box underneath, right under here, and I put my hand behind the fence where there weren't any bees, and I just went 1, 2, 3, smack, and I hit it as hard as I could a couple of times, and all the bees just fell right off into the box. And then, so this is what the box looked like. I taped it all up and I put a cinder block on top of it so it wouldn't blow away because it was a little windy. And then I just left a little flap open here to let so there are some that were still flying around. It was like in the middle of the day, and some of the bees were out scouting a new home location or foraging for food. So I left this flap open so that any of the bees that were left out of that swarm that I knocked into the box, that they could just fly in and out for the rest of the day. And then after I was finished with my really exciting emergency room visit, I went back at night and taped up the box. This is what it looked like all day. It was just, I had a white sheet there because that's something that they recommend. You put a white sheet under where the swarm is, and then the bees will kind of like crawl up into the box. Very simple. And it kind of, the color white kind of keeps them more calm than a darker color. So that's just what's advised. And then like late last night around 10 p.m., I went back and I taped up that hole and I wrapped the box in this white sheet and I just drove home with it. And this morning, I put them in their new home in my backyard. Does anybody have any questions so far? Comments, ideas? Liv, unmute yourself.
Are you going to have slots to put in a big box when you're getting honey, or are you just gonna let them make their own like honeycombs freely and like make it like all random blobs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm gonna skip ahead a couple slides because I have some pictures of. So this is the first swarms that I caught. There were actually 3, and this is my friend. My friend and I caught 3 swarms the first time, and she kept 2 and I brought 1 home. So this was how we caught the first time. And these are pretty like standard hive boxes, vertical hive boxes that we got set up for them. And this is how I got a bunch of like free used equipment from people who have extra. And these are the kinds of things that I have too in my yard. And I have decided that I'm doing like a little bit of a kind of like a hybrid situation, I would say, Liv, where I'm putting them in these boxes and I am giving them frames. These little wooden slats here are actually rectangles of just like very thin wood, open rectangles. And I'm giving them this to build their own honeycomb and, well, their own wax foundations frame into these frames. What this is a picture of is the first swarm that I caught, I put inside this box in my backyard. And I kind of did it wrong. I was afraid of squishing a lot of bees. So I ended up putting this extra box on top, and the bees just stayed in this top box and started building out their own comb, not inside these frames, which is actually not what I wanted to have happen. So after a week of them being in there, I had to go in and I had to take this box off, and what they had done was this. So underneath this group of bees was this, that they had built off of the top here of the box. And this really fresh, clean, nice beeswax was already starting to be filled with honey and pollen. You can see the honey, kind of this like lighter yellow color here, and you can see some pollen, these darker pockets. So I actually had to, I took these pieces of wax off and like kind of like shaved them off of this frame and just left them out for the bees to harvest. They'll basically take all the honey out and put it in new wax. So I felt pretty bad because I like ruined a whole week's worth of work for them because I didn't know what I was doing. But that's what ended up happening. And it's really cool. I mean, this is what they do. They just like constantly work to build these, to build these wax, this wax foundation that they put their food and their eggs into. And this is like their whole life. Does anybody know why the beeswax is in the shape that it is? It is, you know, why it's in these like little hexagons? Have you ever learned about that? Nope. So hexagons are a really common, they're actually a very common shape. This like 6-sided pattern is a really common pattern in nature. And the reason that they build these 6-sided shapes, one next to the other, actually has to do with efficiency. Do you know what the word efficiency means? Does anybody want to tell me in their own words? Sure, Liv, unmute yourself.
Efficiency, wait, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so efficiency is like, it's not being wasteful and like doing it as quick and easy as possible, I guess. And yeah, like not wasting any time or materials. You're just, it's there.
Yeah, that was great. That was a great definition. So it's saving time, saving space, or like making the best use of space inside where they live. You know, using up all the space, using the least amount of materials, and therefore using the least amount of energy possible to create this home, to build out this home. So they're not generating any waste. And the way that these uniform sizes all kind of fit together is all, a really wonderful demonstration of how, nature, how other creatures work in this regard. And a lot of different like flowers are in these sort of patterns, and you'll see this sort of pattern a lot of the time. It's pretty awesome. It also has something to do with creating thermal mass. So they need to be able to keep themselves warm, and they need to be able to keep themselves cool, temperature regulated, which is also really fascinating. And here's the next one. So this is when I went in and checked out this problem that I had accidentally caused. I got to meet the queen. So has anybody ever seen a queen honeybee before? Sort of. Yeah, Baron has. Liv has. That's awesome. Do you have a question, Liv, or you're just saying you've seen a queen bee? Jaden, you have a question? You can unmute yourself if you do.
I have never seen a queen bee, but I have had ant queens on me.
Big old ant queens.
Yep, and I think it might have bit my shirt.
Whoa. Yeah, they're definitely they're very similar. Ants are also social creatures the way that bees are. They're called eusocial, so EUSOCIAL. Eusociality, it means that they, essentially that they are the most social. They are entirely cooperative, and they kind of function as one organism. Sometimes people call them super organisms, meaning, there's thousands and thousands of individual creatures that all work together, like kind of in one, using almost like one consciousness, one brain, more or less. And since there's only one queen, they all share the same genetics. They share the same lineage. These are, all of her relatives. Many of them are her children. Probably all of them, actually. What's up, Elijah? Question?
It's called a hive mentality.
Hive mentality, right. Sometimes people say hive mind. Yeah, and that's something that we talk about when we're talking about humans too, sometimes. But when you're talking about hive mind with humans, a lot of times it's not, people don't mean it in a good way. Baron, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a comment.
Uh-huh.
Queens are the only in the hive that lay the eggs.
Yeah, exactly. The only ones. And so the queen lays all the eggs, and then the worker bees take care of the eggs and feed the eggs so that they can be born healthily. And there are, does anybody know, so there's queen bees and there's worker bees. Do you know what the other kind of bee is? Yeah, Baron, you want to tell me? Drone bees, yeah. The drone bees don't get as much attention because I have a picture in here. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but okay, yeah. So here's a comparison. The drone bees, queen bees are the biggest. The drone bees are kind of like the fattest. And when you see a drone bee, they look so different than the worker bees. And the worker bees are the ones that we see most often and that we're like the most familiar with. This is just like a size comparison, but then I have, this is the worker bee here, which we are all pretty familiar with. I think they're just beautiful. Bees are super lovely creatures. And I love pictures of them up close. It's super cool. This is a drone bee, and I think he looks kind of silly. Worker bees are lady bees. They're females. Drone bees are males, and they have these big buggy eyes. They don't have any stingers. They don't sting. They spend their entire lives living inside the hive. there aren't nearly as many of them. They come out sometimes for like a brief period of time to fly during the day, but they very rarely are outside the hive. Elijah, what's your comment or question?
I thought, is there any king bee?
There is no king bee. There is
Oh.
just a queen bee. Yeah, Baron, comment or question?
Technically, the drones are the king bee because they mate with the queen, but then there's like 100 of them, so it really just doesn't make sense.
Yes. So if you're talking if you're talking about reproducing, then the drones kind of are the kings. You know, if you're talking about where the baby bees come from, the queens are the ones that lay all the eggs, and the drone bees are the bees that mate with her, and where, you know, the eggs come from. The drone bees, they're like Baron said, there aren't really that many of them, and they don't live very long. The worker bees are the ones that do all the work. They do a lot of the work inside the hive. They build the wax, the cells. They take care of the eggs. They do all the cleaning. They're the ones that go out and forage and bring all the pollen and the nectar back in to make the honey. They're really like the powerhouse of the entire operation. Elijah, question or comment?
What do the drone bees do?
What do the drone bees do? They are there to mate with the queen.
Oh, that's it?
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. But it's a big responsibility. I mean, they're a big part of the reason, they're half of the reason that that the hive is surviving at all, right?
Yeah.
But they don't really have, bees are very specialized, right? So they have very specialized roles inside the hive or inside the colony that they live in, and that's what the drones do. The drones mate with the queen. You have another comment or question?
And also, how are the queens reproduced?
How does
How
the
do they-
queen, what do you mean?
How do they make a new queen?
How do they make new queens? That's a great question. Baron might actually have a little bit of an idea about this. I'm still learning, but Baron, you want to talk about it for a second while I find a picture? Oops. Sorry. There you go.
So they kind of will, like, they'll bring up the queen. The queen is just born as a normal bee, except they'll give it special food. Like, they give it some special gel that no other bee gets.
Yeah, that is very,
That's how they get, like, bigger, and yeah.
Yeah. So I have a couple pictures to show you the comparisons, the size comparisons. There's something in the chat. Yeah. So Liv said, yeah, royal jelly. So this is a picture of what a queen cell in a beehive looks like. So I'm gonna go back to this photo. This photo here, it's a little bit blurry, but I'm gonna show. So this is the different parts of the inside of a hive. This stuff up here at the top, underneath these bees, this is called capped honey. This is capped honeycomb. So there's honey inside here that they've capped over to keep it for food, for a food source when they run out of food in the wintertime or the early spring when there isn't enough or aren't enough flowers to forage. This stuff down here in the middle is also honeycomb, but it's not capped yet. And this stuff, all this like kind of reddish stuff at the bottom, oops, is hold on one second. I'm erasing this. Bloop. And then I'm erasing this. Wait, oh no, something just happened to my screen. Give me a second. I don't know why that happened. Let me bring it back up. Whoa, Liv, do you want to talk about that? I didn't know that it comes from their foreheads.
Oh, I really don't know that much.
It's just something that you remember like reading or learning about at some point. Uh-oh, I lost you. You just froze a little bit. So this stuff down here that I was talking to you about, this is all referred to as brood, B-R-O-O-D. So this brood comb is where the queen will lay eggs inside these hexagons, inside these cells down here, and then the worker bees will come over and they will cap the eggs after, and they feed them. They feed the eggs grow into little tiny bees inside these cells, and they feed them very, very often throughout every day. And I think it's like 21, I'm pretty sure it takes 21 days from egg to when it hatches as a new bee. So this is what worker bee brood looks like. It's kind of small and flat. And then there's drone brood, which are a little bit larger because those bees are bigger. And then every once in a while inside, when you look inside a hive, you see these sorts of things. Or maybe they look like these hanging off the bottom, right? These are queen cells. So in order to get new queens, the worker bees will feed the certain eggs a specific type of royal jelly, and there's chemicals, there's like hormones and chemicals that are secreted, I guess, from their foreheads, which is what Liv said. I don't know where it comes from, that makes them grow and, you know, changes them into these queens. So if you're beekeeping, I'm pretty sure that these big fat guys here, these are drone brood, drone eggs, drone babies, and these are the worker babies down here. This looks like it might be a bee that's actually emerging from its cell, a baby bee. And they come out full size. I'm calling them baby bees, but they're the same size as the adult bees. And then this is where the queens come from. So when a hive is getting ready to swarm, what happens is a new queen is born. Sometimes a new queen is born so that the old queen is kicked out and flies away with some of the hive. Sometimes if a queen is sick, the workers know when the queen is sick, when the queen is old, and when she's not laying as well. They'll start training a new queen, start growing a new queen. Jaden, you have a question? No? Okay. I think that was the last of my photos, but I have a couple. So does anybody know what's going on in this picture? Jaden, tell me.
That guy has a lot of pollen on him.
Yeah.
Yee.
So
That's all pollen
yeah.
that he collected.
Yeah, they collect pollen. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and also I know how they make honey.
Tell us.
Do you want to know? Because it's very gross.
That's fine. Tell me all about it.
Okay, so they eat the pollen. They eat it, but they have a special part in their body called a honey stomach, and it has special enzymes in it. And when I get to the hive, this is when it gets gross. They spit it out to another bee, which then they eat it, which gets more enzymes, which then just makes it more syrupy. And that's actually what they eat to feed to their babies. That's why people have honey farms, so then people can get their own honey. And it just keeps going and going and going. But it all comes from pollen. All you need is just some special enzymes. and they get that from the honey stomach that bees have.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so it's very, very specialized body parts that they have that do like miraculous, magical things that certain animals, including humans, have realized over time makes a really, really delicious substance. But ultimately, this is honey is how honeybees keep their families alive. It's their food. It's their food source. It's their specialized job and role, and their comes from their genetics. And we just exploit that. We make it. We keep bees. A lot of times, people keep bees specifically because they want the honey. I keep bees because I love bees and I'm excited about getting honey at some point, but I want most of the honey, if not like all of it, at least for the whole first year or so, to go to the bees so that they can be healthy and happy and make a really big, super cool hive in my backyard. I just want to have lots of bees because, well, does anybody want to tell me about what's going on with bees? And Elijah, you can ask your question if you want.
Huh?
Okay. Anybody who wants to talk to me about what's going on with bee populations? Baron?
Tons of people are spraying pesticides. Actually, like most of our neighbors, 2 of our neighbors who live right next to us actually are spraying pesticides. So it's like per se they do that on the flowers. The bees get the pollen, but then it actually has something really bad in it. So like it could kill them even.
Yeah. So there are pesticides. There are pesticides that are a problem. And pesticides will make the colonies weaker. It will make them unhealthy. It doesn't necessarily kill them, but because they're weaker, a lot of times they are also more likely to get sick and not be able to defend themselves from other problems. So, hives, they're out in the wild, they're out in the open. They also have run into issues with fungus and viruses and bacteria and other critters. There's these things called varroa mites. There are hive beetles. There are wax moths. There's all sorts of things, mice, and there's all sorts of things that try to get into colonies, that try to get into beehives, that can be a problem. But if the colony is strong and healthy, then it can defend itself. I'm running out of time. I have less than a minute. But we can definitely talk more about bees over time. Probably not tomorrow. I want to get better at beekeeping before I teach you guys some more. I want to learn more and get better on my own first. But Jaden, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes. Some spiders also eat bees too. Like a lot of animals are after bees, so they got a tough life.
They do.
Especially since the jobs they have. I feel bad for bees, and I do not want to become one.
Bees work really, really hard, and they do have it pretty rough. You're totally right. And that's why I really want to be able to keep them and try to provide a nice home for them. And teach you guys about them and learn with you about them. So thanks for doing that with me, and thanks for caring about bees.
Good for you.
I think we're going to run out of time.